Thank you. Welcome to 1 Million Cups. I'm going to put mine down because my hands are full. I'm Kayla, and I am your MC today, but I am also the MC tomorrow at TEDx. Today we are doing a special TEDx 1 Million Cups crossover. Yay! It's like when you're watching Scooby-Doo and all of a sudden the Harlem Globetrotters show up and you're like, a mystery, basketball, how is this going to all come together? But it will somehow, I don't know how. Is anybody out there going to make it to TEDx tomorrow? Yay! Is anybody here, this your first time at 1 Million Cups? Oh, good, we have a few. Okay, these are just some informational points for my own personal pie chart later. No, I'm not gonna write anything down. We do want you to download and check in on this app though, because we do actually take some logistical information. Okay, so we have to check in. All right, sponsors. These are the Velmas of our Mystery Machine crew. They actually help us get this stuff done. So if you see them, thank them. Me, I'm just Mr. Jenkins in a mask. Okay, so why are we here? Why, and the same, like, why do a TEDx crossover? Because we're all going to exchange some ideas. So 1 Million Cups is a free weekly meetup. We're here every Wednesday, and we want to give local startups and entrepreneurs a space where they can present their idea and get some interaction with the community. So that's why we're here. That's why what we're doing is what we're doing. And so today we have a special speaker who's got some TEDx information tomorrow. So we're going to do a little bit of that. But first, any community announcements? Anyone have anything happening? I should say my other thing is Game Changer with Humanities North Dakota, and tickets are now on sale at Ferguson Books. Oh yeah, and I have a discount code. You get $5 off if you use that code. So they just hand me a microphone and I'm gonna say all my stuff. My birthday, no, I'm just kidding. It's not till March, so you guys have time to plan, okay? All right, so we're gonna hit it now with our 1 Million Cups. If you have any questions, you can use hashtag 1MCND. We might not have somebody on the tech today, so I want you to be very brave and actually raise your hand and ask questions. But you can still tweet. I like to read your tweets later, because I'm a snoop. All right, let's get on to the important stuff. So we have Megan Laudenschlager today. I'm really excited because I actually know Megan pretty well. We were in the Change Network with one another. She was one of the leaders for that. If you don't know what the Change Network is, you should ask her about it. I also saw her a couple weeks ago in Minot, the Magic City, for a Creative Economy Summit. And we both belong to the It Was a Good Idea at the Time Tattoo Club. So if you're also in that club, show me later. I want to know. Professionally, Megan Laudenschlager is a 2014 Bush Foundation Fellow and has participated in professional development activities through the Harvard Kennedy School of Government, Midwest Academy for Social Justice, Independent Sector, Lilly Family School of Philanthropy at Indiana State University, and TED, our friend Ted, keeps popping up. She is going to tell us about Strengthen ND today. So Strengthen ND supports and accelerates community development in rural North Dakota. They do this by 1, building the capacity of nonprofits and rural community leaders, 2, advancing regional issues, and 3, facilitating community solutions. So that is a lot of things, but Megan's going to tell us all about it. Please help me welcome her.
Well, thank you guys so much for having me today. I've never been to a 1 Million Cups meetup before, and I am super excited that my introduction included my membership to the It Was a Good Idea at the Time Tattoo Club. Unfortunately, if anybody else wants to join that club, let us know. We can compare because they are pretty awful, but at the time they were great. So again, my name is Megan Laudenschlager, and I'm the Executive Director of Strengthen ND. And before we jump into Strengthen ND, I just want to give you a little bit of a background of who I am. So I grew up on a farm and ranch on the Benson County-Eddy County line, just outside of a small town called Warwick. And as I grew older, as the older I grow, the more and more I realize that everything that I learned on the farm and my passion for rural communities is really what has been the driving force behind Strengthen ND. So my family homesteaded within this area, and we helped to, do things like build the Warwick Lutheran Church, and really we're rooted within that community. And the work that we do with Strengthen ND now allows me to feel rooted, but not just within the community of Warwick, but within so many other rural communities throughout our state. And this is me here with my horse Brownie when I was a kid. For some reason, when I was a kid and I rode horse, I never wanted to wear blue jeans. I wore Russell sweatpants. They may remember those. You could hear them way before you could ever see them on somebody. They were so loud and squeaky, but those were my jam. So I grew up, like I said, just outside of Warwick, attended Minot State University, and actually got a degree in math. I wasn't quite sure what it was that I wanted to do with my career, and certainly nonprofit work wasn't even something that was on my radar. But in about 2013, I started to engage with and interface more with the Bush Foundation, and the Bush Foundation really changed my life. As Kayla said, I am a 2014 Bush Foundation Fellow, which means that I received $100,000 to invest in myself and within the professional development to further my career. At the time, I was working at the Minot Area Community Foundation, kind of engaging in typical philanthropy. And the more and more that I started undertaking learnings from the Bush Foundation around equity, around inclusion, and making sure that we don't harm communities with the type of philanthropies that we practiced, the more and more I felt like we were approaching it all wrong. And the more and more I could see kind of the growing disparities between the organizations and the communities that really needed that philanthropic intervention, and just how much they weren't receiving that because of the way that that system was built. So that is kind of what led me to found Strengthen ND. I was really lucky to be circled around with 3 other amazing women who formed my incorporating board. And as Kayla said, the mission of Strengthen ND is to support and accelerate community development by building the capacity of nonprofit organizations and rural community leaders, by advancing regional issues, and by facilitating community solutions. So the way that we operate is a little different from a typical nonprofit organization. We don't do fundraisers, we don't host fundraising events. We really operate more like a social enterprise, where we have our piece of our budget is funded every year through grants, and the rest of it is more that fee-for-service type of work. So really what we do when we work with organizations and communities is we help them to kind of peer into that bottomless pit of need and understand what type of assets that they have. So really helping them to find those hidden gems within their community that they can either leverage or that they can innovate around. So what this looks like really in practice for us, by the way, we're 4 years old. We just hit that birthday last week, so we're very proud of that. And we're also starting to kind of get more presence as we've grown, not only throughout the state, but also throughout other national organizations. One thing that was really important for us was representation with the Citizens Institute on Rural Design, which is a national program through the National Endowment for the Arts. And when we had gone through that program with the community of Tuttle, we kind of felt like North Dakota and the interests of rural communities within North Dakota weren't necessarily represented in the way that they could have been throughout this type of program. So we just turned 4 last week and also earned a spot on the Citizens Institute on Rural Design Steering Committee to help shape that movement of that program moving forward. So now in practice, the 3 pillars of our mission, capacity building, advancing regional issues, and facilitating community solutions, what does that actually look like? Well, capacity building for us falls into 2 big buckets, with the first being technical assistance and the second being our nonprofit certificate program. So our technical assistance offerings, you can see, look a lot like a typical nonprofit consultant. This is more of our business side where we do that fee-for-service work. So it's everything from board and staff development to grant writing to strategic planning to evaluation services. And the fees that we earn from this type of work allows us to work with other communities or organizations that maybe can't afford to pay for it on a pro bono basis. And one of the examples of some of that fee-for-service work that we just kicked off is working with the community of Watford City to do some community planning goals for their community development department. And our certificate program is our certificate program, sorry, is completed in conjunction with Minot State University, and this is an annual program that we host every year, where we work with 15 individuals from different nonprofit organizations to take them through the fundamentals of nonprofit administration. So everything from understanding board governance to nonprofit finance and human resources to grant seeking and grant writing is all covered underneath that 6-month course. And the second pillar, advancing regional issues, this is where we try to circle people around an issue in a community and act to make change. So some of the ways that this is showing up more significantly in our work is with our presence with the North Dakota Local Food Development Alliance. So right now, Strengthen ND is serving kind of as the anchor organization for that entity. And the goal of the Local Food Development Alliance is to bring together all the different stakeholders working within local foods to better understand what the landscape is for the local foods economy and to create and enact a strategic plan to build up that local foods economy. And also, as Kayla mentioned, we are a cooperating partner in North Dakota Change Network. North Dakota Change Network is an initiative funded by the Bush Foundation, but is actually enacted or implemented through National Art Strategies out of Washington, D.C. And our role with this program is to be that North Dakota tie, that boots-on-ground organization to provide that North Dakota expertise. And with this program, it is supporting up to 20 individuals every year, and we're on the third cohort of this program, but supporting up to 20 individuals every year to better understand systems, to better navigate systems, and to be able to enact change so that the system can allow for North Dakota to be a better place for all North Dakotans to live. And our final leg of our mission is facilitating community solutions. Now, this can show up in our work in a variety of ways, but the two biggest ways it's showing up right now is with our work in Tuttle and with our new project called Building Resilient Farm Country. So Tuttle is a really small town just northeast of here, about 45-ish minutes in Kidder County. And Tuttle, the school had closed in 2007, and the community members of Tuttle said, well, we don't know what we want to do with this school. It's a big anchor. You can see at the end of our main street. We don't want it to go to waste. We don't want it to become dilapidated or otherwise in disrepair. So the community held on to it until about 2016, when we were asked to come in and work with the community to better understand how this space could be utilized. So we worked with members within the community, identified some community champions, and supported the community to write for a Bush Foundation Community Innovation Grant, where they were able to receive $200,000 to program out that space based on how they could use that space to support a local foods economy. So we are still working within Tuttle and the members of the Tuttle Rural Innovation Center to plan out how this space could function as a small business incubator, a maker space, an event space, and a food hub. So we have worked with Tuttle not only on the Bush Foundation grant, but they were also the anchor site for our Citizens Institute on Rural Design workshop in 2018. So there's some great work going on up in Tuttle, and we are super excited to really just serve as the catalyst and really as the glue for some of those back-end administrative functions that need to be taking place. And then with Building Resilient Farm Country, this is a new project that we are launching this year, and it's actually going to be the topic of my talk tomorrow at TEDx Bismarck, is how we can spur a modern homesteading movement by repurposing vacant or idle farmsteads here in North Dakota. And we are launching into phase 1 of this project. We expect it to be probably a 10-year project with multiple phases, but phase 1 is really doing first the data gathering. So where are the vacant or idle farmsteads? Where are they located geographically? What condition are they in? What access to infrastructure do they have? What type of soil conditions do they have within the site? What can be grown there? To see if we can't figure out how we can create a land trust ownership model to make these farmsteads permanently affordable housing for lower income or otherwise underserved farmers. And with the land trust ownership model, a community-controlled nonprofit organization retains ownership of that land and then sells or rents the farmsteads on that land to some of those underserved farmers, which will permanently remove a barrier to entry for some farmers, or for some folks seeking to enter the farming industry. So having said all of that, we do a lot of different work. We simultaneously have work going on in Watford City, and Washburn, and in Carrington, all for community planning. And if many of you know the geography of North Dakota, that can mean a ton of windshield time. So as Strengthen ND is looking to grow, that is definitely something that we need to understand better so that we can mitigate. Because windshield time is all lost productivity within the office, it's added costs, and it can just kind of lead to burnout. Other challenges that we are experiencing around growth is how do we keep up with the demand that we're seeing. So as I said, we're kind of being pulled in multiple different directions, and there aren't a whole lot of organizations that are operating within the similar space that Strengthen ND is, where we're seeking only to really be that catalyst and not a direct service provider. So trying to understand how we balance supply with demand, trying to understand how we can grow our services throughout the state without losing so much wasted time and extra costs. And I was just having this conversation earlier this morning, but one barrier that we are kind of bumping up to as we seek to grow is me. Anybody else out there a type A perfectionist with trust issues? Because that is me. So that has been really hard when it comes to hiring new staff and trying to understand who's going to be the right fit within the organization. Do they have the same values as we have within the organization? Because one thing that we're really proud of is the way that we deliver our work, and I think that is one of the ways, or one of the reasons that we are so successful. Is that we propose practical and applicable solutions to organizations. We meet them where they are in terms of their skills or attitude or even geographically. And it's just the way that we go about our work, having that prizing or elevating equity and inclusion that's been kind of hard to match with some other folks that we've tried to hire in the past. So trying to remove myself as a barrier to growth has been really challenging, and I know that other young entrepreneurs or social entrepreneurs sometimes go through the same thing. So with that, who has really the first question? And I know Kayla's going to come up and ask some questions as well, but that's in as brief of a snapshot as I can put it, some of the work that we do with Strengthen ND. Thank you.
I forgot you were also a Minot State person. Go Beavers.
Go
All right?
Beavers. Graduate of Beaver Tech.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So if you do have a question, just throw your hand in the air and Tyler's going to come find you. I had one other thing I was going to ask you. What was it? Nope, forgot. All right. I actually have a few things, but the first thing I lost. Okay, so when a community wants to get some help from you in Strengthen ND, do they usually have the idea first and they're like, we don't know how to do it? Or are they like, we want to do something, what's your idea for us?
So there are a lot of different entry points that communities can utilize to access our services. Sometimes when we go into a community, they might say, well, we think we have this problem, and we get in and start working with them to either gather that data or have those community conversations, and we might find out that the problem that they're seeing is not the actual problem. So that's one of the pieces, is helping the people better understand the landscape that they need to navigate within their community. So sometimes it's, hey, we have this problem, how can you help? Or one of the better things is when they say, gosh, we don't even know where to begin, but these are some of the indicators that we're seeing within our community. How do we pull our community together to organize around this issue? But usually it starts with either a problem or an opportunity, or even just when it feels like things are snowballing within their community.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Two questions, not necessarily related, okay? The first one is, it seems like I've seen in the news lately that a committee, an interim committee from the legislature may be studying closure of grocery stores in small communities. Have you been able to tie into being part of that? And not like you're looking for more business, but you know, just listening to what you're saying, it sounds as though you might be a resource for that. Have you tied into that? So that's the first part.
Yeah.
I'll let you respond.
Thank you. So that's a great question. So you are absolutely correct. The legislature in the interim is studying what our trends are when it comes to our rural grocery store closures. And since 2013, we've lost 20% of our grocery stores in rural communities, which is a huge issue. Doing the work in Tuttle, they have a community-owned grocery store. And I never really understood how difficult it can be to manage supply and manage demand, because is anybody else aware that there is something called double pasteurized milk? There is, and it allows it to last about 30 days within the cooler, right? So there are some tips or tricks that some rural grocers are trying to implement, but when it comes to rural grocery stores, one of the things that's hardest is that cost of distribution, right? So it costs a lot of money for them to get the food truck to come and deliver. And then also our rural communities are getting smaller. So they put all this investment, this front-end investment in food, and then nobody comes to buy it, and then it spoils. So the operating model is a little bit lopsided. And other communities like Tuttle, there's a community-owned grocery store in Wimbledon. They're trying to make them work as nonprofit entities, which they've been able to maintain it within their community. So I grew up just outside of Warwick. When I was a kid, there was a grocery store in Cheyenne, which is about 10 miles away from us, and then that grocery store closed. So my parents still live on the farm, but they have to drive about 45-ish minutes to go and get groceries. And we all know that in the winter, that can be really, really challenging. So we've been able to engage with that effort kind of on the exterior side of it, or on the outer layer. North Dakota Association of Rural Electric Cooperatives, most notably Lori Sapu, is kind of leading that effort, along with Karen Ahrens from a Coalition for a Hunger-Free ND. So we've been able to kind of be kept abreast of it, and additionally, through our support of North Dakota Local Foods Development Alliance, that's a huge issue that we're seeing, because if there aren't rural grocery stores within these rural communities, where can our small producers sell their produce to? So it's a multi-layered issue, and it's something that I think as North Dakotans, unless we want to just kind of go to the big 8 communities, right? Like everybody live in Bismarck, everybody live in Minot, everybody live in Jamestown. If we want to maintain a high quality of life and still have rural communities, we need to figure out the food access issue. So yes, you're absolutely right.
It sounds like you should approach someone like Cross Country or a transportation entity that started in North Dakota, because I think transportation is one of the biggest issues you're facing. So if one of them would step up and say, we can do something. But anyway, the second part, and then I'll be quiet. Hiring. Have you gone to people with gray hair and so on and so forth as part of your staff to ask them to approach some of these perhaps elderly people or mature, let's say, in some of these small communities as a way to try and work in a relationship? And that's it.
So that's a really great question as well. I've never necessarily tried to hire or back channel through some more experienced professionals that I know. I've kind of just gone to the front end of that, the folks that we've engaged with in Strengthen ND so far. So right now we have 2 folks working down at our Tuttle site, both of them part-time, one about 30 hours a week, one about 10 hours a week. And then we just hired on another person who's going to be working full-time for us. The youngest person we've hired, I think, might be late-ish 40s. But the other two folks that I've hired, I have pulled from out of retirement because they know so much, they get it, and the training time is much less, and they can just kind of hit the ground running. But that's a really great idea when it comes to when they don't want to work anymore, right? I'm going to need to work through them to help identify who some of those more experienced folks are. So that's a great point.
I want some of that double pasteurized milk. I was gone for a while and I came back and I had a refreshing Oreo and it was not good.
No.
You mentioned a couple of things like Bush Foundation and the NEA, National Endowment for the Arts, whose sister organization is the National Endowment for Humanities. If you have any arts or humanities questions, I'm your humanities person. There's an arts person, Kim, over there. But how do you help people identify these bigger organizations that do have some funding available?
So sometimes when we work with communities, they have really, really good ideas or great innovative solutions, but they just might not see it as innovative, right? We might not just have the confidence to realize that, oh my gosh, this is something that a national agency or that a regional foundation would really want to invest in. So one of the pieces that I think we've been most helpful with is working with communities to understand what their idea is and working with them to bridge, and oftentimes it's a language gap between the rural community and the language used either by the national funder or by the regional funder. Because we tend to communicate a lot more in kind of plain language here in North Dakota, while sometimes there are some maybe like more colorful or bigger words that are utilized outside of here. So that's been one thing that I think I'm really proud of, is that we've been able to just say, okay, here's your idea. We know this is great. We know it checks all the boxes, but maybe this is how you should describe it instead of this way. And it still gives them ownership in that idea, and we don't change anything that they've proposed. So bridging that language gap, and also trying to share out information that these opportunities are available. I think sometimes in North Dakota, we miss out on funding or we miss out on professional development opportunities because we simply just don't know about them. So bridging that funding gap and just trying to disseminate those opportunities as widely as possible.
Hi, Megan. This is Dave.
Hi.
I've worked with Megan on a couple different
Oh,
fronts.
Dave Blair, hi.
Hi. One in Richardson, and the other one with a nonprofit organization, Connecta. And Megan puts everything into helping, both when we were applying for some grants with Richardson and then also with our nonprofit. But one of the things that I've always felt has been a challenge in North Dakota, in rural North Dakota, is the social barriers that come into play of the community playing against another community. And a lot of it goes back to sports and having those issues. A lot of them was like, okay, we lost the school to town B, and you know, we're not real happy about that. So what are you trying to do to overcome some of those barriers, to break them down? Because it can't be just about a community of like Richardson or Tuttle. It's got to be about the region and the towns around it.
Yeah. So that's a excuse me. That's a great point. Excuse me. We sometimes have that kind of weird territorialism within North Dakota, and I remember, so obviously, like I said, I grew up in Benson County, and I graduated from Minnewacan, and one of our big rivals was Maddock. And I remember telling my mom, I'm like, okay, I've got some meetings in Maddock, I'm gonna be working with them on this, and she goes, oh, Maddock, why are you going to Maddock? You should be going back to Minnewacan. And I'm like, well, Mom, that's not really how it works. I get it, they're Maddock Bobcats, we were Minnewacan Cheyenne Midgets, like, I get it, but also, I'm out of high school now, right? But I think one of the things that we need to realize is that just because one community is doing well doesn't mean that your community can't do as well, if not better. It kind of goes back to that law of abundance versus law of scarcity, right? So if we can work within communities in surrounding another specific community, then their added activity is going to bolster other opportunities for that community. Additionally, we have to stop looking at other communities in envy, right? Like saying, well, this community has an indoor rec center, or this community has a good swimming pool, and not necessarily turn that around and look at, well, this is what our community doesn't have, right? Each community is going to be different, and each community is going to have their own resources or assets that they can build on. And just because there's a swimming pool 30 miles down the road doesn't mean that your community can't have a swimming pool, and it also doesn't mean that your community needs to have a swimming pool. So one thing that I heard from Gail Kreider at the Art Summit was that successful community development initiatives kind of follow the 3 A's. They're authentic, they're attuned, and they're action-oriented. So authentic meaning that they are done by the community and not for the community. Attuned meaning that they are really listening to what's going on with the community and understand the community's landscape. And number 3, action-oriented, meaning that there's a plan, right? So each community should try to kind of practice those 3 A's within their own community, because by being competitive or by looking again at other communities in envy, it's not going to make your community any better. And each community has its own character, it has its own history, it has its own strengths that it can build upon. And again, if all the other communities in your surrounding area or in your county are doing better, that's going to be more traffic, that's going to be more tax collections, that's going to be more people living in your area that you can then leverage. So if a community is having an event 15 miles down the road, how can you piggyback off of that event? Or how can you build on the assets maybe that even they have so that your community can fill a specific niche? It's hard work though. It's really, really hard to get people to understand that.
Good news, I remembered what I was going to say. Okay, so you talked about, you called them Russell pants.
Yes.
In the city, as city kids, we called it a windsuit.
Oh.
Which sounds powerful, but it never failed. Every time I had to wear one, we played Heads Up, 7 Up. Do you remember that game?
No, that was like the Heads Up, 7 Up, just kryptonite.
Yeah, because they knew immediately, because
Yeah.
you'd be like, shoo, shoo, shoo.
Yes.
Yeah. That was a repressed memory I just pulled up. I'm glad you're all here to share it with me. So what would you define rural as? Because I was just at this conference, it was for the humanities, and we were talking about the urban-rural divide. I'm like, yes, we have this problem too. What happens in Fargo isn't the issues they want to discuss in some of the communities you're talking about, but then there's these other states and they'd be like, you know, oh, well, we've got Detroit or we've got Minneapolis. So their urban-rural divide is a completely different story, but here I think we're on a different scale.
Yeah. So how would I define rural? That's a really good question. I mean, we know that the definition is any community 50,000 people or under, but there are definitely varying levels of rural, right? So Minot is a community of about 49,000 people, which is rural, but Minot is very different than Tuttle, which is about 60 people. So we have to keep in mind as we're going out and doing this work, and this was one of our kind of issues rubbing up with the Citizens Institute of Rural Design out of the National Endowment for the Arts. We were the first community, Tuttle was the first community in North Dakota that they had engaged with. And we, by far, were their smallest community. So they were pretty used to working with towns of 40,000 or 15,000 or 25,000 or maybe even 1,500. But when it came to working with us, it was a little bit difficult because they said, well, why don't you leverage this? And we said, we don't have it. Well, how come you can't get more people engaged? We have 10 people engaged. That's literally 15% of the town. I mean, what kind of, so there was some mismatching of expectations. So rural communities really do exist on a spectrum. And it kind of goes back to that 3A principle of authentic, attuned, and action-oriented. We can't approach any community thinking that it's going to be the same as or similar to another community, because we all know communities have their own personalities, right? So we have to understand what that looks like for our work, but really just looking at rural communities on a spectrum, because comparing rural North Dakota to rural Minnesota doesn't necessarily work. Comparing rural North Dakota to rural South Dakota doesn't necessarily work. We might have some commonalities, but to say that one program or one tool can be kind of picked up and dropped in another community in a different state is kind of unrealistic. So they really do exist on a spectrum.
I got a quick question for you, Megan. So, well, it's probably not very quick, but so I grew up in Minot, live in Bismarck now, but had the opportunity to do community and economic development work in Underwood, North Dakota for 3 or 4 years. And one approach I really like from Strength in ND is to not be naive or oblivious to the deficiencies and challenges within a rural community, but to focus and build on the strengths and assets and kind of the identity of the community. And get to know the people in Underwood and kind of the personality of that community. You can see every rural community has their little gems, right? So if you're ever going up to Minot on Highway 83, stop in Underwood, there's 3 places you got to check out. One is on Main Street, it's called the Coal Bin. It's a little consignment and pawn shop run by a guy named Joe Fleischman, who's an awesome guy. Every time I go in there, I find a couple little gems, and that store is a gem in itself. That's one in Underwood. 2 is Grimsley's C-Store right on the corner of Highway 83. They have the best hot ham and cheese sandwich in North Dakota, guaranteed. Every time we go up there, me and my kids got to stop and grab one. So stop and grab a hot ham and cheese from Grimsley's. And the 3rd is the Rusted Rail Bar and Grill, which was started by 2 younger guys last couple of years. Really good bar and grill, great steaks, good sandwiches, kind of a sports bar theme. They've done a really good job with that.
Best rail tots.
Yeah, the rail
Tots.
Fantastic.
Homemade
Absolutely.
tater tots.
I wish I'd known that because I was going to Metagoshi last weekend. My sister was driving. I was just there for the ride, and we stopped at every small place for a shot. Well, I did. And I should have had some tots by that point. But yeah, that was the first time I was in there. I was like, this place is cool.
It is awesome.
I nearly
Absolutely.
lived there.
Absolutely. So I'm curious, with all your windshield time and spending time in these rural communities, what are your couple of favorite hidden gems that you found in rural North Dakota?
Yeah, so a couple of my favorite hidden gems. A lot of it's going to be around food, because I really like to eat.
That's our love language in North Dakota.
Oh, yes. If you head north of Minot, almost to the Canadian border, north of Mohall, there's a little town called Lorain. And Lorain has a restaurant out of basically a converted double wide, and it's called the Naked Moose. And it is the best food you will ever have. The chef actually came out of the cities, and they owned a restaurant in the cities called the Naked Moose as well. But they just kind of got like fed or tired of living a big city life and came all the way out to North Dakota. But even on a negative 60-day, Eric and I went there, my husband and I went there for New Year's Eve this last year when it was way too cold probably to be traveling that far. But he really, really wanted a prime rib, and I really was just ready to intake all of the food that they have. They have a really good bread pudding, so that's a fabulous place. The Ranch in Devil's Lake is another great place to eat. It's kind of in a barn-shaped building. When I was a kid, my parents always told us that it was a furniture store, so it wasn't until I was in my late 20s that I thought, oh, that's not a furniture store. And they told us it was a furniture store because we'd always ask to stop and eat there, and they didn't want us to stop and eat there, so they'd be like, no, they just sell furniture there. Another great little hidden gem would be in the town of Mountain. So Mountain is a really, really small town way in northeast North Dakota, and they have an original Icelandic church. And one of the reasons that I'm super impressed with Mountain is that that town was maybe 2.5 streets, but they have it looks to me to be a multi-million-dollar facility, a multi-million-dollar event space where they host weddings, they host their Icelandic gathering. It's slipping my name right now, but it's an Icelandic gathering kind of similar to Norsk Høstfest up in Minot. And within that, they have a community-owned and run kind of cafe. And I just think if people in these really small communities, they leverage the success that they had with the Icelandic church and all of the gatherings that they have in that town because of it, and they said, well, if we're going to keep doing this, we can use it as an economic generator and use it as leverage to build this beautiful brand new space that people use for trainings, they use for different fire hall auctions and things like that. So that's a great gem because you wouldn't expect to see that at the end of the street in Mountain. So those would be the top three that come to my mind.
I like when parents lie to you because they always told us they're like, go play those games, but it would just be the demo with like the car. They never gave us a single quarter. We didn't know the difference. Oh, we've got another one. Tell me about your parent lie to you. No, you don't have to.
Well, thanks again for coming. You mentioned that part of your funding comes from grants, and I think it's a Bush grant. Maybe you could tell us a little bit more about the Bush Foundation. And also, you have a fee structure. Could you explain your fee structure a little bit more?
Sure. So our annual operating dollars actually don't come from Bush Foundation. It comes from Otto Bremer Trust. So Otto Bremer Trust is a fantastic regional foundation, and one of the reasons that they fill a pivotal or critical role in North Dakota is that they're one of the very few foundations that will provide operating funds, right? They look at organizations, they say, you're doing good work, now here's money so you can just keep doing that work, which in the nonprofit field is very, very, very rare, and specifically in North Dakota, very rare. So we're incredibly thankful to them. We do get, kind of by way of Change Network, some annual funding from the Bush Foundation. The Bush Foundation is a regional foundation out of St. Paul. It is the remnants of Archibald and Edith Bush. Archie was the first accountant for 3M Corporation. You might not know necessarily what 3M Corporation does, but they invented the Post-it note. So that's what most people are kind of connected to. So once he passed away, he left all of these funds in his name, the Bush Foundation. And the Bush Foundation started out as a foundation that really supported leadership growth and development. So they've been doing fellowships like the fellowship experience that I had since, I want to say, the late 1950s or early 1960s. So they're a fantastic organization now that is working more in the realm of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and supporting community problem solving. And they have a ton of different grant programs that you can access, and professional development, scholarships, or other opportunities like Change Network that you can access as well. So they are fantastic. They're actually coming to Bismarck in the middle of September. I think September 18th, they're hosting a foundation reception here at the Heritage Center. So definitely check them out. They are a fantastic, wonderful organization. So we are about 60% every year grant funded through the Otto Bremer Trust. And our fee structure is such that there are some, like I said, communities or organizations where we know they are strapped. They couldn't even pay us if they want to. So we provide those services as a part of our pro bono budget or in kind. We worked very, very hard to understand the landscape of kind of consultants that we're working within. And we also tried to be as affordable as possible. So our fees range anywhere from about $55 an hour up to $75 an hour, depending on the level of work. So that is still quite a bit lower than some typical consultants would charge, but it is a way for us to stay affordable, but to still cover our costs. And because of that grant funding, we have more of that flexibility to do so as well.
Another one?
A little bit of proof that 1 million cups comes out to a benefit is I just texted one of the community leaders of Wing. I have a citizen advocacy group for Burley County and Bismarck and trying to make tomorrow better than today. And they've had a couple of struggles because I've been listening to the meetings and they don't know about you. Yeah. So I texted him, he happens to be in town and he's going to see if he can be en route to meet you.
Oh, well, fantastic. Perfect. Thank you.
That's one way we can cut down on that wind chill time.
On that windshield time, man, if there could be, I'm serious, if somebody could just make a light rail
Yeah.
or a subway between Minot and Bismarck, that would
Public
help me out so
transportation.
much.
No, I love the way people describe time travel because when we were at the Creative Economy Summit, the mayor of Robinson, he said, "Oh, we're about one and a half podcasts away from here," and I was like, "Yeah, that's how I measure my time too."
About it.
Hi, thanks for coming. This has been fascinating. You mentioned a board and you mentioned staff. Do you use volunteers at all? And if so, how?
That's a good question. So right now, the volunteers that we have engaged within Strength and ND are our board of directors. I've not leveraged volunteers directly to help deliver services. One of those pieces is it's never necessarily come to mind, so that's a good point to think about. But when we look at working within different communities, a significant amount of our kind of time and training within communities is getting them to develop that leadership pipeline or that pipeline of volunteers, because we all know that people in communities are strapped, right? They're often the mayor, the bar owner, the event coordinator, the chair of the regional arts council within their community. So everybody is just so stretched for time, and if we don't develop that deep bench of people, things in our community that we try to implement today won't be sustainable. But to answer your question, we've not utilized them to help deliver services, but that would be a good thing for us to explore.
Kind of in the vein of volunteer, you had one story at that Creative Economy Summit about, I can't remember which community it was, but all of the folks came together and formed their own.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a spoiler for tomorrow or something.
No.
Tell me about
I'll
that.
talk about that tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay, so remember I told the story about going to work in Maddock, and my mom was like, "Why are you going to work in Maddock? You should work in Minnewacan." But the organization I was working with was called the Maddock Opera House. So in the town of Maddock, it's about 350 people in Benson County, which is one of those federally designated strike force counties, where at least 20% or more of their population is in persistent poverty. So I'm telling you this just to kind of like set the stage of the landscape, I guess, that they had to navigate. But there was a dilapidated building on their main street, and the community looked at that building, and they're like, "Gosh, we don't know what we can do with this, but we know we've got to do something. We're investing so much in our main street right now, but we've got to figure out what to do." So when that building was built in the early 1900s, it was called the Harriman Building because that's who built it. And the gentleman who built it loved the arts. So he had a general store on the first floor, and on the second floor he had an opera house space where he brought in tons of different singers and plays and hosted so many community events up in that space. And then, over time as things happen, buildings change hands, things are kind of lost. So the community looked back at that history and they said, we have a really thriving arts and music program at our school. We should look at how we can build off of that asset and also bring this back to its historic function. So it was kind of the two champions of it, one being Paul Bachmeyer and the other being Lee Hagen. But they kind of coordinated a little bit of a ragtag team, retired teachers, other kind of farmers in the community. And they said, okay, we're going to do a fundraising campaign. We're going to go out. We're going to tell people this is what we want to do and see if they'll donate. And they ended up raising close to $1 million in just a couple of years without any professional fundraising support, even without kind of this super fleshed out plan that we would think about having for a typical capital campaign. All they really did was they just told the story of the community, how this building was so pivotal to the community and what it can mean for the community moving forward. So they used that money to leverage some grants and loans from USDA Rural Development. And being the super pragmatic, practical farmers that they were, they said, okay, well, we can take this money and we can use it all for materials and we can do the building ourselves, right? Like we can do the build out and the construction ourselves. And USDA being a federal program, having guidelines, needing to have a bid process and things like that, they said, well, you can't have volunteers do this labor. You have to have a licensed construction company to do it. So that group said, fine, we can do that. So they organized and incorporated the first ever all-volunteer construction team in North Dakota called Lightning Construction, so that they could use all that money for materials, still get the project, and build it out themselves. So I just thought that that was a really unique way to tackle maybe a hurdle that might be put on us regarding funding, and just another way that some volunteers really doubled down and said, we believe in this and we're going to do the work ourselves.
Farmers get it done.
Farmers get it done,
Yeah. Is that a farmer?
right?
Anything else? All right. Well, at the end of every 1 million cups, we ask you the same question. So I'm gonna, it's a really tough one. I'm gonna turn over Tyler.
Megan, thank you so much for taking time with us this morning. Last question we always ask is, how can our 1 Million Cups community here in Bismarck and Van Dam better support Strengthen ND?
How the 1 Million Cups community in Bismarck and Mandan can better support Strengthen ND. To help us tell the story of Strengthen ND, really one thing that would be great is to tell the story of your rural community that you came from. I think a lot of folks who maybe moved to Bismarck or some of our more quote-unquote urban areas are from small towns, and we have to keep telling the story of what those towns were like and what those towns could be. Because there sometimes is this attitude that kind of filters down from folks around, well, why are we even investing in these communities? Everybody's going to live in these larger communities. Nobody's going to want to live there. And that is completely the opposite of what we believe, right? We believe that people should be able to live a life in the manner that they choose. And one way of doing that is by supporting rural community viability. So you can help us to continue supporting rural community viability by telling the story of the small town that you came from, and by talking about why it's important that other people have access to the same type of lifestyle that you had when you were growing up. Because I really believe that I would be a different person if I were raised in a larger town like a Minot than if I were raised out in the farm out by Warwick. And many of us who might be younger still have parents who either live on the farm or live in that small town. And we want them to have a high quality of life. We don't want them to have to drive 45 minutes to go and get groceries every week or every 2 weeks, or I don't know. My mom is so good at just like buying all the things, and I have to go to the grocery store every day. I don't know how she does it. But it's so integral to the type of state that I think that we want to build, that we can allow space for small communities to exist, and not just to exist, but to thrive and to be better. Because I really believe that we can't rely on everybody wanting to live in a larger community. So tell the story of your small town, talk about why it's important that we have these small towns. That would be incredibly helpful to Strengthen ND. And if anybody finds a cure for being a type A perfectionist, I would appreciate that. Type A perfectionist with trust issues. Maybe I'll just mellow out when I get older, but maybe not. That would be really, really helpful. So yeah, just tell the story of the town that you grew up in. Talk about those historical gems that you find when you go into a small town, because I think that's one thing that kind of gets missed as we all drive on I-29 or Highway 2 or I-94, right? We miss out on some of these gems that these small towns really have to offer.
Make your sister drive you so you can take shots at all the bars. It's really an experience.
And then stop and get some rail tots.
Yeah, it's the best. Who here would consider themselves from a rural community or has family still in a rural community? Yeah, get your Russell pants on and go home for a weekend, why don't you? All right, so thank you so much for coming to 1 Million Cups. We hope to see some of you tomorrow at TEDx. You get to hang out with us again. This has been our crossover time. If you want to be on this glorious stage, please apply to present and tell us your story about your community, your hidden gem, the thing you're doing to make your community better. So we hope to see you next week. Thank you so much. Thank you.